Welcome to Video Narrative 6E in our contemporary review of society. We will take a current look at the primary institution of academia and learning. In the primary culture institutions of academia and learning, we examine the quality and focus of the educational leadership, policies, and results in America today. This is part one of a three-part video narrative. The educational system, in all its complexity, layers of governance, and pools of resources in any culture is a fundamental structure in which organized societies develop the minds and values of its youth in order to focus them on meaningful and worthwhile pursuits, professions, and contributions back to the underlying society. It is largely through the educational institutions that a society is able to transfer the values of its people from one generation to the next, and to the next, into perpetuity. The family, as we previously pointed out, is the principal way we pass our cultural values on to the next generation. Religious worship is another, through the various institutions of religion. And perhaps just as influential today is academia and our houses of learning within our society. Through the world of academia, society is able to transfer the essential DNA of its values, be they moral or political, directly to people, and many would note, unencumbered by family or religious persuasions. For this reason, the leadership of a culture, more to the point the political class of a nation, takes great and careful interest in how the values they want to inculcate into the populace are managed, beginning with how they are defined, followed by who shapes them and by what means they are taught, to every pupil across the nation and across time. They take great interest on where the values are taught and with what frequency, within all places of learning, from preschool through college, in urban, suburban, and rural areas, in rich districts and in poor ones. With these ambitious aims in mind, we can readily understand why many involved with academia and our educational systems in America have such great interest in seeing things develop in a particular way, especially the moral relativists among us. Realize they go by many names, yet their ideological beliefs and amoral dispositions are the same: secularists, atheists, agnostics, progressive liberals. In our schools, our universities, sitting on national policy and legislative boards, in academic regulatory agencies and advisory groups, the relativists have pushed their way in, vehemently pushing their progressive positions to make or influence policies, standards, and the direction of the educational focus. If you listen, you will hear them. If you look, you will see them, eagerly pursuing their intents, their control and heavy influence of the academic agenda, and the underlying culture of learning. They are always focused on what people are taught or what they should not be taught, like God or Judeo-Christian values, who teaches them, how young minds are structured to learn, and where and when they are to learn or not. And always attempting to control the open examination and debate of ideas, frequently seizing opportunities to shut down free speech on the campus or in the school. The moral relativists have no problem in denying others the opportunity to learn and discuss new ideas or opposing thoughts. Their solution is to shut it down, so as to protest their narrow and biased beliefs, most often from ideas which challenge radical left progressive creed. The reality is, ceding control over to the moral relativist has already largely occurred. It's been happening over the past 5 decades in academia and our schools, as moral relativists have been taking control of school administrations, student life, academic standards, the quality and quantity of learning, and it will continue to negatively affect the personal, moral, and political development of our youth. The growth of moral relativism in our institutions and cultures of learning is having and will have serious ramifications to our youth as they grow up, graduate, and advance into society to become active citizens of the economy and our nation. The great historian, writer, and philosopher Voltaire once said, "To learn who rules over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize." One could add to that, or what you're not allowed to criticize, as moral relativists are quick and certain to judge others and eagerly orchestrate silencing their critics or whomever challenges their direction. Let's explore moral relativism and our educational systems a little closer. Moral relativists are generally known to us in society as committed progressive liberals. By its very nature, moral relativism is the backbone of modern-day progressive liberalism, and as such, it's almost always at the center of thinking, principles, choices, and subsequent actions undertaken by the typical progressive liberal. It's certainly fair to say not all progressive liberals are full moral relativists. Yet when people move away from God's eternal truths as the center and authority for their personal or social morality, and displace God with only the measure of themselves, it is difficult not to get pulled in by the gravity of relativism and the subsequent chaos it eventually breeds. Moral relativists are clearly the unmistakable danger among us, especially in our academic and learning institutions, where they nest in and spread out. In the deep-rooted progressive, you may invariably find a bona fide hardened moral relativist, convicted to his or her convenient persuasions, regardless of reason or genuine moral inspiration. The relativist has hardened their heart against the enlightenment of a supreme and loving God and the absolute truths which ultimately define the purpose of life. Moral relativists in our academic and educational world focus major time and effort to control and dominate the learning agenda. They do so in grade schools, middle and high schools, and especially in colleges and universities across the country. Their ultimate goal is clearly control and domination of what is learned in America, as a primary means to bend political thinking and action to their ideological beliefs, which are, of course, liberal and progressive in nature, and to marginalize or prohibit conservative and religious beliefs. The progressive liberal agenda is about controlling free thinking and speech through political correctness, preventing free expression of all ideas by radical protest and/or driving liberal, ideological-driven courses. It's about setting national policy for education and centrally enforcing it on the states, changing textbook content to reflect a progressive liberal view, forcing God, religious beliefs, and moral standards out of schools, keeping public education under union control, denying school choice, and saturating colleges and universities with progressive liberal administrations and academians, keeping conservative influence to a minimum, if at all. Today, the progressive liberal agenda in relations to academia and learning in America is structured by controlling what people are allowed to think, study, present, say, or even wear, by controlling the ideas they hear about, or those ideas they want to talk about with other students or speakers. The burning moral relativist inside the die-hard progressive liberal is anything but liberal when it comes to free speech. They are restrictive and judgmental. Political correctness is a key tool used by moral relativists against the free expression of ideas or speech which conflict with the liberal progressive ideology. And as such, political correctness comes in many different colors, sometimes in particular situations, most times by way of communications, always directed at people, teachers, and students. Typically, it will manifest at events or any circumstance which occurs, wherein there is a discussion of open and challenging thoughts. Political correctness, PC for short, is wielded by school and collegiate administrators as a tool to coerce and force submission to a liberal progressive bias in the education system. Many times, charges of infringement on diversity are made directly for the purpose of silencing opposing points of view. A couple of other buzzword charges are failure to provide inclusion or equal in treatment. You'll also hear hurt feelings fronted as an aggression against the aggrieved. They're often exaggerated or conflated with other concerns, with the ulterior motive of gaining control of public debate and freezing out countering opinions, all of which suffocate free and open education. Another example of political correctness is what is happening at Duke University, where Duke students claim political correctness has produced a climate of fear on campus. Somehow I don't think we associate fear as conducive to learning, do we? Students at Duke are banding together to call for restoration of academic freedom. In a Texas high school, the school leadership decided to do away with the National Honor Society recognition to avoid hurt feelings because less academically capable students are not included in the honor. How moronic is that? Political correctness has added particular terms in our language and culture over the past several years, like the term white privilege. How insulting. When liberals make that charge against the millions of immigrants, the Irish, French, Italian, Germans, Polish, and many other whites, who came to America poor, uneducated, and powerless. Was it their privilege to work in woolen mills, sweatshops, farms, coal mines, paper factories, steel mills, on farms, sweating through long 15-hour days and horrendous work conditions? Yet despite the real hardship, the white privilege rose up through the hard work and perseverance, through learning and faith in God, and overcame the hardship poised against them. We think they and their children, and their children's children, have earned their voice in America's society, and they should never be silenced. How about the other term, free speech zone, equally ludicrous? Basically, the concept of a college setting aside a small area where people can assemble to protest or speak about some issue, typically one that goes against the expected liberal progressive code. Advocates for civil liberties rightly argue that the free speech zones are actually not free at all, as the people who dictate them use them as censorship to control and minimize differing points of view from the public at large. And in one college in the fall of 2016, we had 3 young women chastised for wearing a Halloween costume depicting 3 blind mice. The college's bias incident team cried foul and set off alarm bells of oppression and aggression simply over an amusing costume. Even the Ivy League schools are not immune from the political correctness nonsense. The Christian Science Monitor dutifully reported in 2015 that a Yale professor was resigning in response to free speech suppression at Yale. A student protest and uproar occurred over the professor's reasonable email encouraging maturity and tolerance on a range of amenable and diverse Halloween costumes designed for a night of fun. Social justice warriors organized a hateful protest to denounce the professor's commentary. And upon graduation, Yale administrators actually honored the students who led the protest, against the professor who defended Halloween costumes, against the dignity and intellect of Yale's own, against reasonableness and common sense. This is what the roots of relative morality look like when they deepen into the fabric of academia. Wrong becomes right, white becomes black, idiocy surplaces intellect. Also on the campus of the University of Missouri, the president of the university is pressured by a noisome, boisterous group of students who decide that some sinister conspiracy against blacks on campus is occurring and social justice at the university is needed. The university president, with the aim to reduce the notoriety to the university, elects to resign for the betterment of the academic reputation, and subsequently the university's reputation is tarnished, resulting in significant enrollment decline. Some would argue that the university president would have been better served to lead than flee. Here's one for the record books. Now we have a state university in the liberal state of New York, part of SUNY, which by the way is largely funded by the taxpayers' hard work and public funding, by many people of all color, and a good many of them white. So here we have the State University of Binghamton, now offering a course called Stop White People, as part of a routine training for residential assistants who run the dormitories. That's odd. I didn't know we had such a pressing problem with white people at our universities. And again, at the Ivy League school, Princeton begins to remove the word man from the official school material. their Human Resource Department issued a 4-page memo outlining examples of gender-neutral terminology that must be used in official school documents. Here's the list of their absurd instructions. Consider, this nonsense is occurring at one of our country's most prestigious academic institutions. Further reflecting the chilling effects the political correctness movement is having on free expression and academic standards, an NYU professor crusading against political correctness foolishness and its corresponding cousin, student coddling. The school administrators booted him out so that they could appear politically correct in their response. Never mind the professor was doing the right thing by the students in pointing out these misdirected efforts to suppress thinking. The strength of education in America today is under assault by progressive liberals espousing their agenda for relative morality. Universities and colleges, once the unmatched premier line of education in the entire world, are increasingly becoming soft and irrational as they pander to the weakness and immaturity of their students, as opposed to teaching them the discipline and skills necessary for a challenging and competitive world ahead. We are witnessing the coddling of the youth in the very institutions which should be teaching them the skills and how to be strong, industrious, creative problem solvers. Many reasonable-minded people are asking a necessary question. Are we creating a society of snowflakes, where people are eager to find themselves offended, subjected to microaggressions, and continuously seeking a grievance? Laughable notions such as university safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions have all been eagerly forced onto campuses by liberal elitist educators, actively attempting to socially engineer a restricted speech environment. And when you restrict speech and nurture a victim mindset, what actually happens is thinking and self-confidence is weakened, if not destroyed altogether. Are we allowing pseudo-intellectuals and educational bureaucrats to run amok and dumb down the learning culture on our university and college campuses? Are we allowing them to create a cupcake generation of whiners and sheltered children who have no notion of how to assume personal responsibility for individual achievement and coping in the real world? A generation of immature adolescents looking for rewards where there is no achievement, looking for excuses for their shortcomings instead of self-development and maturity. At Harvard University, the cupcake generation is active in exercising the grievance mindset, whining about pro-life students and American flags, as both are somehow offensive to their narrow, delicate sensibilities, incapacitating their ability to learn and think. Sheer idiocy has been trampled over American college campuses, and Harvard is no exception. It ranges from students triggered by pro-Trump slogans to arguments about cultural appropriation or hairstyles. Political correctness is the destructive virus created by the progressive left and infecting our campuses at both public and private schools. Not too long ago, Fox News' Megyn Kelly had on Rachel Huebner, a staff writer for the Harvard Crimson. Rachel detailed how the PC police are destroying the institutions of learning. She commented on how the latest batch of college students are coddled, soft, and downright incorrigible. She wondered how one might think that the faculty or the administration would be the point of the lance in the war of free speech. But it's not. It's the students. Huebner described an incident where a student felt she could not learn, let alone be in the same room if she knew a classmate was pro-life. Having a viewpoint that's different from your own is very, very offensive in delicate snowflake land. More disconcerting is a separate incident involving Huebner's friend trying to put an American flag on a wall of his dorm room. He's a freshman who was unpacking his things when his roommate stopped him from displaying the flag, considering it an intolerable political statement that he was unwilling to make. The story drew laughter from Kelly's crew, and rightly so. We really should wonder how these young men and women are going to face the unpredictability of the real world once they graduate. Unless they come from a truly dysfunctional home, they won't receive the coddling they get on some college campuses as they do today. Instead, they'll face a contentious, competitive world where true ability and brains are required to survive and succeed. and they will face that world unequipped to engage, thanks to liberal moral relativists having denied them a real education. Moral relativists want young minds which don't think, don't question, and willfully surrender to the intentions and policies of a central government. This completes Part 1 of Academia and Learning. Please continue on by going to 6E Part 2.